"Do you also crave my body like the others?" the Apache woman whispered to the rancher. The morning sun rose slowly over the wide, open plains. The golden light touched everything it met: the tall grasses swaying in the gentle wind, the distant hills, and the small ranch where a lone rancher lived. He was a man who had spent most of his life working with the land. His hands were rough from years of tending to cattle and fixing fences, and his clothes carried the faint smell of earth and leather. Life had taught him patience, resilience, and the quiet rhythm of the seasons. Not far from the ranch, there was a small settlement of Apache families. They lived close to the land, moving carefully with the changing weather, hunting, gathering, and teaching their children the ways of their ancestors. Among them was a young woman known for her courage and sharp mind. She was careful around strangers, yet curious about the world beyond her own. Her eyes reflected the forests and rivers she grew up near, and her heart carried a strong sense of pride in her people and traditions. Their first meeting happened by chance. The rancher was walking near a small stream that cut through the edge of his land. He often went there to check the water for his cattle or just to enjoy the quiet. On this particular morning, he noticed movement on the other side of the water. There, standing gracefully among the trees, was the Apache woman. She had spotted him too and watched quietly. Neither of them spoke at first. They were both cautious, aware that the other was not part of their usual life. Days passed, and their paths began to cross more often. Sometimes it was near the stream, sometimes on the trail where the rancher rode his horse to check the fences. Each time they exchanged small gestures, nods, brief smiles, or simple greetings. These moments were brief but meaningful. The rancher admired her strength and intelligence, while the woman noticed the kindness in his eyes and the respect he had for the land. Neither understood exactly why they were drawn to each other, but there was a sense of quiet curiosity that neither could ignore. Life around the ranch was never simple. The rancher worked from dawn to dusk, ensuring the animals were safe, the fences intact, and the crops growing. He faced challenges from harsh weather, wandering predators, and the constant worry of not having enough help to manage the land. Despite this, he carried a sense of pride in his work. It was demanding, but it was honest, and it gave him a place in the world. Meanwhile, the Apache woman also had her responsibilities. She helped her family gather food, tended to the younger children, and learned from the elders about the stories and traditions that had been passed down for generations. Her life was full of movement, learning, and understanding the balance of nature. She respected the land deeply and knew that survival depended on careful attention, patience, and wisdom. One afternoon, a sudden storm approached while the rancher was inspecting the fields. Dark clouds rolled in, and the wind began to howl through the tall grasses. He hurried to secure the animals, but the storm arrived faster than expected. The rain fell heavily, soaking the land and making the path slippery. As he struggled with a stubborn gait, he heard a voice calling through the storm. It was the Apache woman who had come to make sure he was safe. Together, they worked quickly to protect the animals and secure the ranch. That day marked a turning point. The rancher realized that despite their different lives, there was a connection built on trust and mutual respect. The Apache woman saw that his work was not just a job, it was a way of life, and he treated it with dedication and honor. From that moment, they began to share more than just glances. They shared stories of their lives, lessons they had learned, and hopes for the future. Evenings became a time for reflection. After the day's work, they would sit near the fire, sometimes together, sometimes at a distance, and watch the stars appear one by one in the clear sky. The quiet moments allowed them to think about who they were, where they came from, and what they might learn from each other. Their conversations were simple at first, about the weather, the land, or the animals. But slowly they began to talk about their dreams, the people they cared for, and the challenges they had faced. The connection between the rancher and the Apache woman was not sudden or dramatic. It was built slowly, step by step, like the careful planting of seeds in a field. Each shared smile, each act of help, and each conversation added to something deeper than friendship. Both of them began to realize that trust and understanding were possible even between two very different worlds. By the end of part 1, the rancher and the Apache woman had discovered that sometimes the most meaningful connections grow quietly. They had not known each other for long, yet the experiences they shared, facing storms, working the land, and simply being present, had started to build a bridge between their lives. Both felt that the future might hold challenges, but also a possibility of learning from each other, supporting one another, and respecting the paths they each walked. The sun set over the plains, casting long shadows and painting the sky with shades of orange and pink. The rancher looked toward the horizon, thinking of the day's work, the storm, and the unexpected friendship that had begun to form. The Apache woman returned to her settlement, feeling a similar mix of curiosity and cautious hope. Neither knew what lay ahead, but both sensed that something important had begun, something that would change the rhythm of their days and the understanding of their own hearts. The days that followed the storm brought a quiet rhythm to the lives of both the rancher and the Apache woman. The land had recovered from the heavy rains, and the cattle were safely back in their pastures. For the rancher, the work never ended. There were always fences to repair, fields to tend, and animals to care for. Yet, amid the busy hours, he often found his thoughts wandering to the woman who had helped him during the storm. He could not explain why her presence had made such a difference. It was not just the help she had offered. It was the calm strength she carried, and the way she seemed completely at home in the wild, untamed land. The Apache woman, too, thought often of the rancher. She had always been cautious around outsiders, yet there was something different about him. He did not come with harsh words or demands. He worked alongside the land as she did, respecting it rather than trying to change it. In her community, she had been taught to be careful, to observe, and to trust only when the signs were right. With the rancher, she found herself smiling at his small gestures of kindness, noticing the quiet way he helped the animals, and feeling a sense of safety she had not expected. One morning, the rancher decided to visit the stream where they had first met. The sunlight danced on the rippling water, and the gentle hum of birds filled the air. He saw her there, collecting water and tending to a small patch of wild plants that grew along the bank. They greeted each other with a simple nod, but this time, the silence carried more warmth. Without speaking much, they worked side by side. He repaired a broken fence near the stream, and she sorted and cleaned the plants she had gathered. The day passed quietly, but every glance and gesture deepened their understanding of one another. Over time, their meetings became more frequent. Sometimes they spoke about simple things, the weather, the land, the challenges of daily life. Other times, they shared stories about their families, their childhoods, and the experiences that had shaped them. The rancher spoke of the long hours he had spent learning to care for the land, the lessons his father had taught him, and the pride he felt in maintaining a ranch that had been in his family for generations. The Apache woman spoke of the traditions of her people, the importance of respecting nature, and the stories passed down by elders that guided their lives. Their friendship was built on shared respect and curiosity. They discovered that despite the differences in their daily lives, they faced similar struggles, hard work, moments of doubt, and the challenge of finding balance in a world that often demanded more than they could give. These shared experiences created a bond that neither had expected, and each encounter left them looking forward to the next. One afternoon, while exploring a nearby ridge, the rancher noticed a group of wild horses grazing in the distance. The sight of the horses brought a spark of excitement to both of them. They had never seen such a large herd so close to their land. The rancher explained how the horses moved together, how they communicated without words, and how understanding their behavior was key to managing cattle and other animals on the ranch. The Apache woman listened intently, asking questions and pointing out details he had not noticed. It became a moment of learning and mutual admiration. As the sun began to dip behind the hills, casting long shadows across the plains, they decided to make their way back. On the way, they spoke less and observed more. Each was aware of the presence of the other, feeling a quiet comfort in simply walking side by side. The rancher noticed how naturally she moved over the uneven terrain, how confident and balanced she seemed. She noticed how he paused occasionally to take in the view, his eyes reflecting both thoughtfulness and a deep connection to the land. Life, however, was not without challenges. The rancher faced unexpected setbacks when a part of the fence had been damaged by fallen trees during the storm. Repairing it required extra effort and time, and he often had to stay out long after the sun had set. The Apache woman faced her own difficulties as well. Food was sometimes scarce, and she had to help her community find and prepare supplies while balancing her own needs and responsibilities. These struggles could have driven them apart, but instead, they found ways to support one another. The rancher sometimes brought small supplies to help, while the woman offered advice on how to make the land more productive and safe. One evening, as the sky turned a deep shade of purple, the rancher invited her to sit near the edge of his property and watch the sunset. They shared a simple meal, talking quietly about the day and the work they had accomplished. The moment was peaceful, yet it carried a sense of importance neither of them fully understood. It was not about romance or excitement. It was about recognition, respect, and the growing trust that formed between two very different people. The Apache woman began to see the rancher not only as someone from another world, but as a man of integrity and patience. She admired his dedication to the land and his willingness to learn from her guidance. He, in turn, respected her intelligence, her knowledge of the natural world, and her courage in facing the challenges of life in a harsh and sometimes unforgiving environment. Their conversations grew deeper, sometimes touching on personal fears, hopes for the future, and reflections on the lives they had led so far. Slowly, the surrounding community began to notice their growing friendship. Some people were curious, others skeptical. But the rancher and the Apache woman paid little attention to gossip or judgment. They had found in each other a sense of connection that transcended differences, a bond that neither could fully explain but both felt deeply. It was a quiet strength, built on shared experiences, respect, and understanding. As weeks turned into months, their relationship continued to evolve. The rancher taught her small skills he had learned over the years, such as tracking cattle and maintaining tools. She shared her knowledge of the land, guiding him through the forested areas and teaching him how to recognize signs of changing weather, animal behavior, and plant life. Together, they explored new areas of the plains, discovered hidden streams, and observed the cycles of nature in a way neither could have done alone. Through it all, the rancher and the Apache woman learned that true companionship was not about constant conversation or grand gestures. It was about shared moments, quiet understanding, and the ability to rely on one another when life demanded it. They discovered that friendship could cross boundaries, bring comfort in hard times, and provide a sense of purpose beyond the work and responsibilities of daily life. By the end of Part 2, the bond between the rancher and the Apache woman had grown into something strong and enduring. They had faced storms, shared knowledge, and learned to trust one another. They were no longer strangers who had met by chance at a stream. They had become companions, walking side by side through the challenges and beauty of the plains. Each knew that the future would bring difficulties, but they were confident that together, they could meet whatever came with patience, understanding, and respect. The sun finally set, painting the horizon in shades of gold and crimson. Both returned to their homes with a sense of quiet satisfaction, knowing that something meaningful had begun. The connection they shared was not loud or dramatic, but it was real, steady, and full of promise. A promise that the days ahead would continue to teach them, challenge them, and bring them closer to understanding the true value of trust, friendship, and mutual respect. Spring had arrived on the plains, and with it came a sense of renewal. The grasses were green and tall, the streams full, and the land buzzing with life. The rancher and the Apache woman had grown even closer over the past months. Their connection was no longer just about brief encounters at the stream or shared work. It had become a part of their daily lives. Each morning, the rancher woke with the thought of her strength and the calmness she brought, while she often thought of the quiet determination he carried in every task he performed. The rancher had begun to notice small changes around him. The fences seemed sturdier, the cattle healthier, and even the land itself seemed to respond to the care he gave it. He realized that working with someone who understood the land so deeply made a difference he had not expected. The Apache woman's guidance was gentle but precise. She pointed out subtle signs of soil health, animal behavior, and weather changes that he had once overlooked. Through her, he was learning not just to manage the land but to truly understand it. One day, while repairing a fence near the far edge of his property, the rancher encountered a problem he had not anticipated. A section of the fence had been damaged by a fallen tree during the winter storms. Alone, it would have taken him days to fix it, and the task felt overwhelming. But the Apache woman arrived just as he was examining the damage. With quiet efficiency, she suggested a plan. He would remove the broken posts, and she would help gather strong branches and materials from nearby trees. Working together, they lifted, hammered, and tied, their actions coordinated in a rhythm that spoke of trust and familiarity. By late afternoon, the fence stood tall and secure once again. That evening, they sat on a small hill overlooking the ranch. The sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the plains, and the air was warm with the scent of grass and earth. They spoke less than usual, each lost in thought, yet their silence was comfortable. The rancher reflected on the lessons he had learned from her: patience, observation, and the importance of listening to the land. The Apache woman thought about the way he approached challenges, not with frustration or anger, but with determination and calm. They had learned from each other, and in that exchange, a quiet respect had grown into something deeper. However, life on the plains was never without its challenges. One morning, the rancher discovered that a section of his pasture had been damaged by a wandering herd of wild animals. The fence had been torn down in one corner, and several cows had wandered off. He immediately began searching, feeling a rising tension in his chest. The Apache woman appeared shortly after, offering to help track the missing cattle. Together, they followed the trail, noting hoof prints in the soft earth and listening for the distant calls of the animals. The task tested their patience and skills, but through teamwork, they managed to round up every cow by late afternoon. During moments like these, the bond between them strengthened even further. They began to understand the importance of relying on someone who could anticipate your thoughts and act in harmony with you. The rancher noticed her quick thinking and attention to detail, and she admired his perseverance and calmness under pressure. Even small successes, like securing the herd or fixing a fence, became shared victories that deepened their connection. In addition to the work on the ranch, the Apache woman introduced the rancher to parts of her culture and traditions. She taught him about the importance of seasonal cycles, the stories behind certain plants and animals, and the ways her ancestors had lived in harmony with the land for generations. At first, the rancher listened with curiosity, but soon he began to see the wisdom in her teachings. He realized that life on the plains was not just about hard work, but about understanding the delicate balance between people, animals, and nature. One afternoon, they discovered a hidden grove of wildflowers and medicinal plants while exploring the outskirts of the ranch. The Apache woman explained the uses of different plants, from healing minor cuts to preparing teas for comfort during cold nights. The rancher was amazed at how much knowledge she carried in her mind, and how carefully she respected every plant and tree around them. He realized that their friendship was teaching him to notice the smaller details of life, the things that often went unseen but were essential for survival and happiness. Yet, not every moment was calm or simple. A sudden storm approached one evening, faster and stronger than either of them had expected. Dark clouds rolled across the sky, and wind began to tear at the trees. The rancher quickly secured the animals in a sheltered pen, but the Apache woman pointed out that the small stream nearby could flood quickly. They worked together to build temporary barriers with branches and dirt, protecting both the livestock and the land. By the time the storm passed, they were soaked and exhausted, yet a quiet sense of accomplishment settled between them. They had faced the power of nature and come through it together, their trust in one another stronger than ever. As spring progressed, the rancher began to notice other changes in his own life. He felt a growing sense of purpose and responsibility, not just for the land, but for the bond he shared with the Apache woman. Her presence brought a calmness he had never experienced before, and her wisdom gave him confidence in facing challenges. In turn, she appreciated the way he treated her as an equal, respecting her knowledge and supporting her in moments of difficulty. Their friendship was a partnership, built on shared effort, understanding, and mutual respect. Community life also began to shift around them. Other neighbors noticed their frequent collaboration and quiet companionship. Some were curious, others skeptical, but both the rancher and the Apache woman paid little attention. Their focus was on the land, the animals, and the trust they had cultivated in each other. It was a relationship not defined by words or expectations, but by action, understanding, and the shared experience of living and working on the plains. Through these months, the rancher and the Apache woman also learned to celebrate small joys. They noticed the first blooms of spring, watched the young calves taking their first steps, and enjoyed quiet moments by the stream where birds sang and water rippled over smooth stones. Even in the simplest events, they found opportunities to connect, reflect, and appreciate the beauty of their surroundings. These shared moments reinforced the sense of companionship that had begun months ago and made each day meaningful beyond the work and challenges it brought. By the end of Part 3, their friendship had grown into something profound. They had weathered storms, overcome challenges, and learned from one another in ways that neither had anticipated. The rancher had gained not just practical knowledge, but insight into the deeper rhythms of the land and life itself. The Apache woman had found someone who respected her wisdom, shared her dedication, and worked alongside her with patience and care. Together, they had built a partnership that was both strong and gentle, capable of enduring the trials of the plains and the unpredictability of life. As the sun set on another long day, they stood side by side on a small hill, watching the sky turn gold and pink. The wind whispered through the tall grasses, carrying the promise of another day filled with work, discovery, and shared moments. They knew the journey ahead would have more challenges, but they also knew they were no longer facing it alone. Their trust, respect, and companionship had become a foundation on which they could build, and each step forward strengthened the bond that had begun quietly, months before, at a small stream on the edge of the ranch. Summer had settled over the plains, bringing warmth, long days, and the hum of life across the ranch and surrounding lands. The rancher and the Apache woman had become a steady presence in each other's lives. Their companionship had grown stronger with every shared task, every conversation, and every challenge they faced together. The land itself seemed to reflect this harmony. The pastures were lush, the cattle healthy, and even the small streams sparkled as if mirroring the calm trust between them. One morning, the rancher woke before sunrise, as he often did, to check on the cattle and prepare for the day's work. He noticed a soft glow in the distance, and the sight of the rising sun filled him with a quiet energy. Soon, the Apache woman arrived at the ranch, carrying a small basket of wild fruits she had gathered along the edge of her settlement. They exchanged a warm smile, a silent acknowledgement of the bond they had built. Together, they set out to inspect the fences, water sources, and grazing areas, each moving with purpose and understanding. While working, they discovered signs of a small predator near the cattle, a fox that had been sneaking into the pastures at night. The rancher felt a surge of concern for his animals, but the Apache woman remained calm. She explained how to track the fox and create safe boundaries without harming it, showing him a method of protecting the herd that worked with nature rather than against it. They spent hours reinforcing the fencing, setting up safe paths, and ensuring that the animals would be secure. Through this, the rancher realized how much he had learned from her careful observation and respect for life. In the afternoons, they often walked together to explore parts of the land that the rancher had never fully understood. The Apache woman showed him how to identify different plants and their uses, how to read the sky for weather changes, and how to listen to the subtle sounds of animals in the distance. The rancher was amazed at her knowledge, and he found that even small lessons, like recognizing the direction of the wind or noticing a change in soil color, made a huge difference in the work they did. It was as though she had opened his eyes to a new way of seeing the world. One particularly hot afternoon, they came across a patch of land where the soil had begun to dry and crack under the sun. The rancher felt frustrated, knowing that crops and grass for the cattle might be affected. The Apache woman, however, approached the situation calmly. She taught him methods to conserve water, improve the soil, and plant seeds that could thrive in dry conditions. Together, they worked under the blazing sun, digging small channels to guide water, spreading mulch and planting seeds in a careful pattern. By the time the sun began to set, the land looked transformed, and both felt a quiet pride in their efforts. Their shared work was not just about survival, it became a way of learning from each other and growing together. The rancher learned patience, observation, and the importance of balance. The Apache woman saw the dedication, skill, and quiet strength he brought to every task. They began to share more than just practical knowledge. They shared dreams, thoughts about the future, and reflections on the lives they had led so far. They spoke of hopes for the land, for their communities, and for a life filled with purpose and harmony. However, life was never without unexpected challenges. One evening, a sudden fire broke out in a dry patch of grass near the ranch. Flames spread quickly, and the rancher realized that without immediate action, the fire could threaten the cattle and nearby areas. He and the Apache woman worked tirelessly to create fire breaks, move the animals to safety, and contain the flames. They labored through smoke and heat, relying on each other's knowledge, skill, and courage. By nightfall, the fire was under control, though both were exhausted and covered in soot. Yet, the experience strengthened their bond. They had faced a crisis together and emerged with even greater trust in one another. In quieter moments, they reflected on the events of the day. The rancher admired how the Apache woman remained composed even in dangerous situations, while she appreciated his calm determination and willingness to face challenges head-on. Their companionship had become a source of strength for both, a reminder that they were not alone in facing life's hardships. They began to understand that true partnership was built on respect, shared effort, and the ability to support each other when difficulties arose. Summer also brought moments of beauty and joy. They would often sit by the stream in the evening, listening to the gentle flow of water, the rustle of leaves, and the calls of birds returning to their nests. Sometimes they would share stories from their pasts, the rancher about his childhood and family, the Apache woman about the traditions and lessons passed down through her community. These moments were quiet but meaningful, providing insight into who they were and what had shaped them. One day, while exploring a distant part of the plains, they stumbled upon an abandoned cabin. Its roof was sagging, and the walls showed signs of years of weather, but it held a certain charm. The rancher imagined restoring it, turning it into a place where travelers or neighbors could find shelter. The Apache woman suggested ways to repair it using natural materials, blending it with the surrounding landscape. Their collaboration on the project became another way to combine their skills, learn from each other, and create something lasting. As the weeks passed, they began to notice subtle changes in the community around them. People saw the way they worked together, the trust they shared, and the respect they had for each other's knowledge. Some neighbors approached for advice, others offered help, and slowly, a small network of mutual support began to form. The rancher and the Apache woman realized that their partnership had grown beyond themselves. It was beginning to influence and inspire those around them. Through these experiences, they also learned important lessons about patience, compromise, and understanding. They discovered that not every problem could be solved immediately, and that sometimes the best approach was to observe, plan, and act with care. Whether it was repairing a fence, tending to the soil, or protecting the animals, they had learned to work in harmony, combining strength, knowledge, and intuition. By the end of Part 4, the rancher and the Apache woman had grown into a remarkable team. They had faced fires, storms, and challenges from the land itself, yet they had always emerged stronger. Their bond was now a source of stability, guidance, and quiet inspiration for both. They understood that their connection was not merely about friendship. It was about partnership, mutual respect, and the shared joy of working with the land and each other. As the summer sun set over the plains, they stood together on a ridge, looking out at the golden fields, the flowing streams, and the distant hills. The air was warm, carrying the scent of wildflowers and fresh grass. In that moment, they felt a sense of fulfillment, knowing that the bond they had nurtured would continue to grow, guiding them through whatever challenges or joys the future might bring. Their journey together had taught them that true companionship was forged through shared effort, trust, and understanding, a bond strong enough to weather storms, fires, and the trials of life itself. Autumn had arrived on the plains, painting the landscape in shades of gold, orange, and red. The air was crisp, and the days grew shorter, signaling a change in the rhythm of life. The rancher and the Apache woman had spent months working together, learning from each other, and facing the challenges of the land side by side. Their bond had grown into something steady and dependable, a partnership rooted in trust, respect, and shared experiences. The rancher started the day early as usual, checking the cattle and preparing the tools needed for the day's work. The Apache woman joined him soon after, carrying a basket filled with gathered nuts and dried herbs she had collected from the forested areas nearby. Their morning routine had become a comfortable rhythm, working, observing, and helping one another without needing many words. Even the smallest tasks, repairing fences, tending to animals, or clearing debris, were easier and more enjoyable because they were shared. One morning, while exploring a section of the land that had been untouched for years, they came across a small, neglected garden hidden near a grove of trees. The garden was overgrown, but it had potential. The rancher immediately saw the opportunity to restore it, imagining fresh vegetables and herbs growing once again. The Apache woman smiled and suggested using natural methods to enrich the soil, plant seeds carefully, and protect the garden from wildlife. Together they cleared weeds, tilled the earth, and planted seeds, working side by side as the sun climbed higher in the sky. It was hard work, but it brought them satisfaction, and their teamwork strengthened further. As the days passed, they encountered challenges that tested both their skills and patience. A sudden cold snap threatened the young plants in the restored garden, and the rancher had to improvise coverings to protect them. The Apache woman guided him in creating barriers with natural materials, showing him how to insulate the soil while allowing sunlight and air to reach the plants. They spent hours arranging everything, and when the cold passed, the garden had survived. The small victory filled them both with pride, and it reminded them that persistence, careful planning, and cooperation could overcome many obstacles. In addition to tending to the land, they began to notice changes within themselves. The rancher realized how much he had grown since meeting her. He had learned patience, careful observation, and how to approach challenges calmly rather than with frustration. The Apache woman had also noticed her own growth. She appreciated the sense of steadiness he brought, his willingness to learn from her, and the way he treated her as an equal. Each had taught the other lessons that extended beyond survival or work. They had taught each other about trust, respect, and the joy of shared effort. One afternoon, while walking near the stream that had first brought them together, the rancher spoke about his plans for the winter. He wanted to ensure that the cattle were safe, the land prepared, and the garden protected. The Apache woman suggested strategies to store extra feed, collect firewood, and make the streams accessible for the animals during freezing nights. They worked together for hours, planning and preparing, and the rancher realized how invaluable her knowledge had become. Her wisdom had transformed his approach to the land, and he felt grateful for every lesson she had shared. The seasons continued to change, and with autumn came moments of reflection. Evenings were spent sitting by the fire or near the stream, watching the sun set and the sky turn brilliant shades of orange and purple. They shared stories of their pasts, dreams for the future, and hopes for the land they cared for. The rancher spoke of his childhood, the lessons his family had taught him, and his desire to leave the land better than he had found it. The Apache woman shared the stories of her ancestors, the wisdom of her community, and her hopes for a harmonious life with the land. These conversations deepened their bond, allowing them to understand not just each other's actions, but the reasons behind them. Life was not always calm, however. A strong windstorm one evening tested both their preparedness and resilience. Trees bent, loose branches fell, and the wind threatened to damage fences and garden structures. The rancher and the Apache woman worked quickly, reinforcing weak spots and securing the garden, tools, and livestock. Exhausted but satisfied, they watched the storm pass, realizing that their teamwork had made the difference between loss and safety. They had faced challenges together for months now, and each event strengthened their trust and confidence in one another. Through all these experiences, they began to see the broader impact of their efforts. Neighbors and members of the Apache community noticed their collaboration, the way they worked harmoniously, and the respect they showed for each other's knowledge and traditions. Some came for advice, while others offered help, and gradually a network of cooperation and mutual support formed. The rancher and the Apache woman became quiet examples of what could be achieved when people worked together, respected the land, and valued each other's perspectives. As the days grew shorter and the first frost appeared, they focused on preparing for winter. The rancher ensured that the cattle had enough shelter and feed, while the Apache woman guided the storage of grains, firewood, and supplies. They built protective covers for the garden, ensuring that seeds and young plants would survive the cold months. The work was demanding, but it brought satisfaction. They had created a safe and productive environment, and their efforts reflected the harmony between human diligence and nature's rhythms. During one particularly quiet evening, as they sat near the stream and watched the reflection of the moon on the water, the rancher spoke about the months they had spent together. He expressed gratitude for her guidance, her patience, and the trust they had built. The Apache woman smiled and acknowledged the lessons she had learned from him, the perseverance, dedication, and calm strength he had shown in every task. In that moment, they understood the depth of their connection. It was not just friendship or partnership. It was a bond forged through shared experience, mutual respect, and the ability to face life's challenges together. As winter approached, the plains became quieter. Snow dusted the hills and fields, and the cold reminded them of the fragility and beauty of life in such a vast, open land. The rancher and the Apache woman continued their routines, tending to animals, maintaining fences, and ensuring the land was ready to endure the harsh months. Yet, even in the cold and quiet, their companionship brought warmth. They had learned to rely on each other, support each other, and find joy in small successes, shared knowledge, and the simple beauty of the land around them. By the end of Part 5, their journey had come full circle. From a chance meeting at a small stream to months of shared work, challenges, and learning, the rancher and the Apache woman had built a partnership that was rare and meaningful. They had faced storms, predators, fires, and cold, yet they had grown stronger through each trial. Their bond was now a foundation, steady, enduring, and built on trust, respect, and shared purpose. The sun rose one final time over the plains, casting a warm glow over the ranch, the garden, and the flowing stream. The rancher and the Apache woman stood together, looking out at the land they had cared for and nurtured. In the quiet of that moment, they understood that life's true value was found not only in the work done or the challenges overcome, but in the companionship, trust, and respect shared with someone who truly understood and valued you. Together, they had created something lasting, something that would endure through seasons, storms, and the passage of time. A reminder that harmony, patience, and mutual care were the truest measures of success and happiness.